Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. Today, if you were an alien and wanted to learn about human culture, you'd go to an American football game, wouldn't you? That's what I was thinking too. Check if you're subscribed today, because if you're not, do it today. It is totally free. But now, let's get into the story. Xylo, an anthropologist hailing from a planet far removed from Earth, sat in his sleek metallic spaceship, a holographic display illuminating the interior with images of Earth's inhabitants engaged in a peculiar activity. He had been observing humans for months, intrigued by their propensity for what he considered to be unnecessarily dangerous and seemingly pointless activities. He had seen them leaping from great heights, strapped to flimsy contraptions that slowed their descent just enough to avoid imminent death. He had watched them plunge into the depths of their planet's oceans, encased in bulky suits and breathing from artificial apparatus. He had even observed them hurling themselves down a snow-covered mountain, balancing precariously on thin planks of plastic. But none of these activities had perplexed him as much as the one currently playing out on his screen, a sport known as American football. Such violence, he muttered to himself in his native tongue, the guttural clicks and whistles forming words that roughly translated to organized chaos. He watched as two groups of heavily padded humans collided with each other, vying for possession of an oddly shaped ball. And what is the purpose of this game? He questioned aloud, his three-fingered hand tapping rhythmically on the console. His species was not one for physical confrontation, preferring intellectual pursuits and peaceful coexistence. The concept of a sport that involved intentionally inflicting pain on opponents was entirely alien to him. And he couldn't deny the allure of the spectacle, the energy of the crowd, the roar of the stadium, the intricate strategies and maneuvers of the players. It was all strangely captivating. Perhaps, he mused, a closer look is warranted. After careful consideration, Xylo decided to embark on a field trip, as it were, to Earth. He had developed a technology that allowed him to temporarily alter his appearance, mimicking the bipedal form of the humans. It was not a perfect disguise, but it would suffice for his purposes. He programmed his ship's autopilot and descended through Earth's atmosphere, landing in a remote area far from any major cities. He exited the ship, his disguise activated, and immediately felt the pull of gravity, stronger than that of his home planet. It was an uncomfortable sensation, but one he quickly adjusted to. His destination was a stadium in a place called the United States, where a major football game was set to take place. He had purchased a ticket online, posing as a human enthusiast of the sport. He'd even done some research on the teams and players involved, hoping to blend in as seamlessly as possible. He arrived at the stadium several hours before the game was scheduled to start, mingling with the throngs of fans already gathering. The atmosphere was electric, a palpable buzz of excitement and anticipation. He observed the humans in their colorful jerseys and face paint, their voices raised in cheers and chants. He purchased a hot dog and a beer, mimicking the actions of those around him. Though he had no intention of consuming either, the food and drink were simply props, a way to further blend in. As the game began, he took his seat in the stands, surrounded by raucous fans. He observed the game with a keen eye, taking notes on his datapad, disguised as a mobile phone. The rules were complex, the strategies intricate, the violence, well, that was self-evident. But what he found most fascinating was the emotional investment of the humans. They cheered and groaned in unison, their moods fluctuating with the fortunes of their chosen team. They'd hug strangers when their team scored, cursed their rivals when they made mistakes. It was a display of tribalism and camaraderie unlike anything he'd ever witnessed. During a break in the action, Xylo decided to take a closer look. He excused himself from his seat, making his way down the crowded aisles, his disguise allowing him to move freely among the humans without arousing suspicion. He found himself in a corridor beneath the stands, where players and coaches were milling about. He overheard snippets of conversations, a mix of strategy, encouragement, and the occasional expletive. He spotted a group of players huddled together, their coach addressing them with a fiery intensity. Xylo activated his translator, a small device implanted in his ear, and listened in. "All right, men," the coach barked. "This is it. We're down by 10, but there's still plenty of time on the clock. We need to dig deep and find that fire in your belly and take the game back. Remember, it's not about just the score. It's about pride. It's about leaving it all on the field. Now get out there and give me everything you got." The players responded with a chorus of "Yes, sir!" and then dispersed, their faces grim with determination. Xylo was struck by the coach's words. There was a depth of emotion there, a passion that went beyond mere desire to win a game. It was about something more, something intangible. He decided to approach one of the players, a young man with a look of intense focus on his face.
"Excuse me,"
Xylo said, his voice slightly higher pitched than a human's, but not enough to be noticeable.
"I'm a fan. I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions."
The player looked at him with surprise, but then a smile spread across his face. Sure thing, buddy. What's on your mind?
"I'm new to this sport," Xylo explained, "and I'm trying to understand why. Why do you do this? The violence, the risk of injury, it seems illogical."
The player chuckled. It's not about logic, man. It's about heart. It's about pushing yourself to the limit. About being part of something bigger than yourself. It's about the thrill of the victory, the agony of defeat. It's about life, man. Life in its purest form. Xylo pondered the player's words, a new understanding dawning on him. Perhaps the humans were not as illogical as he had initially thought. Perhaps there was a method to their madness, a deeper meaning behind their seemingly reckless pursuits. As the teams returned to the field, Xylo followed, securing a spot on the sidelines among the photographers and reporters. He wanted to be as close to the action as possible, to feel the raw energy of the game. The second half began with a flurry of activity. The home team, invigorated by their coach's pep talk, started to gain momentum. Their quarterback, a young man with a rocket arm and nerves of steel, connected with his receivers for a series of impressive gains. The crowd roared with approval, their cheers deafening. Xylo watched in awe as the players performed feats of athleticism that seemed to defy the laws of physics. They leaped high into the air to catch passes, dodged and weaved through defenders with lightning speed, and tackled each other with bone-jarring force. It was a ballet of violence, a symphony of aggression. Yet there was also a sense of order, a structure to the chaos. Each play was a carefully choreographed dance, each player knowing their role and executing it with precision. Xylo found himself drawn into the game, his initial skepticism replaced by a grudging admiration. He began to see the appeal, the thrill of watching these human athletes push themselves to their limits, testing their strength, speed, and agility against one another. He also noticed the camaraderie among the players, the way they supported and encouraged each other, even in the face of adversity. They were a team, a brotherhood, bound together by a shared passion for the sport. As the game reached its climax, the tension in the stadium was palpable. The home team had managed to close the gap, and with only minutes remaining on the clock, they were driving towards the end zone, the area where a touchdown would give them the lead. The crowd was in a frenzy, their cheers reaching a fever pitch. Xylo could feel his own heart pounding in his chest, his adrenaline pumping. The quarterback took the snap, dropped back and scanned the field. He saw his receiver break free from his defender and launched a perfect spiral towards him. The receiver caught the ball in stride and sprinted towards the end zone, defenders closing in on him. He dove for the goal line, the ball outstretched. The stadium held its breath. Touchdown! The stadium erupted in a cacophony of sound. Fans leaped to their feet, screaming, cheering, hugging one another. The players on the field piled on top of the receiver, celebrating their hard-fought touchdown. Xylo watched, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He had to admit, this was exhilarating. The raw emotion, the energy, the sheer joy of victory. It was infectious. He decided to seize the opportunity to gather more data.
"Excuse me,"
he said, his voice barely audible over the din.
"I'm a reporter. Would you mind answering a few questions about this game?"
The fans, caught up in the excitement of the moment, were happy to oblige. They talked about their love for the sport, the history of their team, the rivalries, the traditions. They explained the rules, the strategies, the nuances. Xylo listened intently, soaking up the information like a sponge. He learned about the origins of football, its evolution from a simple game played on college campuses to a multi-billion-dollar industry. He learned about the cultural significance of the sport, how it brought people together from all walks of life, united by a common passion. He also learned about the darker side of football, the injuries, the concussions, the toll it took on the bodies of the players. He heard stories of broken bones, torn ligaments, and lifelong disabilities. Yet, despite the risk, the fans remained fiercely loyal to the sport. They argued that football was more than just a game, it was a way of life. It taught values like teamwork, discipline, and perseverance. It gave people something to cheer for, something to believe in.
Xylo found himself nodding along, a newfound respect for the sport and its followers taking root within him. Perhaps he thought there was something to be said for this human obsession with competition, with pushing oneself to the limit, with risking it all for the thrill of victory. As the game drew to a close, the home team emerged victorious, their last-minute touchdown securing their win. The crowd poured onto the field, a sea of humanity celebrating their triumph. Xylo stood on the sidelines, watching the scene unfold, his datapad filled with notes and observations. He had come to Earth with a mission to study the peculiar pastimes of humans, but he had found something more. He had found a people who, despite their flaws and foibles, were capable of great passion, loyalty, and resilience. He had found a people who, in their own strange way, were truly remarkable. As the stadium emptied and the last echoes of celebration faded, Xylo made his way back to his ship, a wealth of data and newfound perspective in tow. The journey back to his home planet was long, giving him ample time to compile his findings into a comprehensive report. He meticulously detailed the rules and strategies of American football, the physical and mental demands placed on the players, and the cultural significance of the sport. He delved into the psychology of the fans, exploring the motivations behind their unwavering loyalty and the emotional roller coaster they experienced during games. He analyzed the economic impact of football, the vast sums of money generated by ticket sales, merchandise, and television rights. But most importantly, he reflected on what he had learned about the human spirit. He had seen firsthand the power of competition to ignite passion, to inspire teamwork, and to push individuals beyond their perceived limits. He had witnessed the joy of victory and the agony of defeat, and he had come to understand that these emotions, while seemingly irrational, were an integral part of the human experience. Upon his return, Xylo presented his report to his peers, a council of esteemed anthropologists. They listened intently, their faces a mixture of fascination and disbelief.
"Such violence,"
one remarked, echoing Xylo's own initial reaction.
"Such reckless abandon. It seemed almost barbaric."
"But is it not also magnificent?" Xylo countered.
"The passion, the dedication, the sheer force of will. These humans are capable of extraordinary feats when motivated by their passions."
The council members exchanged glances, their minds churning as they processed Xylo's words. They'd always viewed humans as a primitive, illogical species, but Xylo's report had challenged that preconceived notion.
"Perhaps,"
one of the elders said, a hint of admiration in his voice,
"we have underestimated these humans. Perhaps there is more to them than meets the eye."
Xylo smiled, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. He had not only fulfilled his mission, but he had also broadened the understanding of his own species. He had shown them that humans, while often perplexing, were not without their merits. In the end, Xylo's report sparked a renewed interest in Earth and its inhabitants. It led to further research, more expeditions, and a greater appreciation for the complex and often contradictory nature of the human race. As for American football, it continued to thrive, its popularity growing with each passing year, and while Xylo never fully embraced the sport himself, he could not deny its power to unite and inspire. It was, after all, just one of the many crazy things humans did for fun. The following day, Xylo found himself in a peculiar location, a local park, populated not by families enjoying picnics or children playing on swings, but by a group of burly men clad in athletic gear. He had tracked down a local amateur football team, hoping to experience the sport firsthand. His reasoning was simple. If he was to truly understand this human phenomenon, mere observation was not enough. He needed to participate. He had introduced himself as Kyle, an exchange student eager to learn the intricacies of the game. His disguise held up well, his alien physiology masked by his human form. The team members, a diverse group of ages and backgrounds, welcomed him with open arms, their enthusiasm for the sport evident in their eager explanations and demonstrations. Xylo found himself on the receiving end of a crash course in football basics. He learned about the roles of the quarterback, the running back, the receivers, and the linemen, and even attempted to tackle a tackling dummy, much to the amusement of his teammates. His alien strength and speed gave him an advantage, but his unfamiliarity with the sport's nuances made him clumsy and awkward. He fumbled passes, tripped over his own feet, and once even ran in the wrong direction, much to the bewilderment of the quarterback.
Yep, despite his initial struggles, Xylo persisted. He was determined to understand the appeal of the sport, to feel the rush of adrenaline that the players spoke of, to experience the camaraderie of the team. After hours of practice, drenched in sweat and aching in muscles he didn't even know he had, Xylo finally started to get the hang of it. He began to catch passes with greater consistency, to anticipate the quarterback's throws, to dodge and weave through defenders with surprising agility. His teammates were impressed, their initial skepticism replaced by a grudging respect. They saw in him a raw talent, an untapped potential waiting to be unleashed. As the sun began to set, the practice session came to an end. The team members gathered around Xylo, slapping him on the back, offering words of encouragement. "You've got a natural talent, Kyle," the quarterback said, a wide grin on his face. "You just need a little more practice, and you'll be a real asset to the team." Xylo smiled back, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. He had taken the first step towards understanding the crazy things humans did for fun. But he knew that this was just the beginning. The real test would come when he stepped onto the field for a real game. The following week, Xylo returned to the park, eager to continue his football education. The team was practicing for an upcoming game against a rival amateur squad, and the intensity was high. Xylo, still somewhat clumsy but undeniably athletic, threw himself into the drills with gusto. During a particularly intense scrimmage, as he attempted to tackle a burly running back, something went wrong. Xylo misjudged the angle, collided awkwardly, and felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. He fell to the ground, a gasp escaping his disguised human lips. His teammate rushed to his side, their concern evident on their faces. "Kyle, you all right?" the quarterback asked, kneeling beside him. Xylo groaned, clutching his shoulder. The pain was intense, unlike anything he'd ever experienced before. His alien physiology was resilient, but it was not immune to the brute force of human contact sport.
I don't know,"
he managed to say, his voice strained.
"It hurts."
The coach called for a timeout, and the team gathered around Xylo. He was helped to his feet, his arm cradled against his chest. "Looks like a dislocated shoulder," the coach said, his brow furrowed. "We need to get you to a hospital." Xylo was taken to the nearest emergency room, where his shoulder was quickly put back into place. The pain subsided, but he was left with a lingering ache and a sling to immobilize his arm. As he sat in the waiting room waiting for the paperwork to be completed, Xylo found himself pondering the events of the day. He had been injured, genuinely hurt, during a game that was, in essence, just a form of entertainment. Why? He asked himself aloud, his voice barely a whisper. Why would anyone willingly subject themselves to this kind of pain? He thought back to the conversation he had with the player the previous week. The player had spoken of heart, of pushing oneself to the limit, of the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. But was it really worth it? Was the fleeting satisfaction of winning a game worth the risk of injury, of pain, of potential long-term damage? Xylo didn't have the answers. He was an anthropologist, not a philosopher. His job was to observe and analyze, not to judge. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something fundamentally irrational about this human behavior. Days turned into nights, and the quiet hum of Xylo's spaceship filled the void where the raucous cheers of the stadium had once echoed. He had healed completely, his alien physiology knitting his shoulder back to full functionality within hours. But a different kind of ache lingered, a longing for the camaraderie, the shared purpose, the raw emotion he had experienced on that football field. He had found himself replaying the practice sessions in his mind, the feel of the ball in his hands, the thrill of a successful catch, the adrenaline rush of a near tackle. He missed the laughter and the trash talk, the shared meals and the post-practice analysis. He even missed the pain, the sting of a tackle, the burn of a sprint. It was a strange sensation, a yearning for discomfort, for the physical manifestation of his effort, for the proof that he had pushed himself beyond his limits. He realized then that he had become more than just an observer. He had become a participant, a teammate, part of something larger than himself. And now that part was missing. He thought of his teammates, their faces etched in his memory. The quarterback's encouraging smile, the coach's gruff but genuine concern, the camaraderie of the linemen, the shared jokes, and the unspoken understanding. He thought of the upcoming game, the one he had been preparing for, the one he would now miss due to his injury. He wondered how the team was doing, if they were missing him, if they would win without him. The thought of his new friends battling it out on the field without him filled him with a strange sense of longing, a desire to be back in the thick of things, to to be part of the action. He knew then that he couldn't stay away. He had to go back. With a renewed sense of purpose, Xylo piloted his ship back to Earth, landing once again in the secluded clearing. He reactivated his human disguise, transforming back into the eager exchange student Kyle. A nervous excitement fluttered in his chest as he made his way back to the familiar park. As he approached the field, the sight that greeted him warmed his alien heart. His teammates were in the midst of a heated practice, their shouts and laughter echoing through the park. Seeing him, they paused, their faces breaking out into wide grins. "Kyle, you're back!" The quarterback boomed, jogging over to greet him.
"Hey, guys,"
Xylo replied, a genuine smile on his face. "Missed you all." They peppered him with questions about his injury, their concern evident. He assured them he was fully healed, eager to get back on the field. The coach, a gruff but caring man, pulled Xylo aside for a private conversation. "Glad to see you're doing better, Kyle," he said, his voice gruff but his eyes warm. "We were worried about you." Xylo thanked him, explaining that his shoulder had healed remarkably quickly. The coach nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "You know, Kyle, we got a game coming up this weekend. We're a little short-handed, and..." He paused, seemingly hesitant. Xylo's heart leaped. Could this be what he was hoping for? The coach continued. "Well, we were wondering if you'd be interested in playing." Xylo didn't hesitate.
"Absolutely!"
he said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. The coach grinned. "All right then, Kyle. Welcome to the team." Xylo spent the rest of the practice session getting reacquainted with the playbook and working on his technique. His teammates were patient and supportive, offering tips and encouragement. Despite his initial clumsiness, they could see the raw talent and determination in his eyes. As the practice ended, Xylo couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. He was not just an observer anymore, he was a player. He was going to experience the thrill of competition, the camaraderie of the team, the raw emotion of the game firsthand. He was going to play American football. Game day arrived with an electric atmosphere. The air thrummed with anticipation as Xylo, now suited up in his team's colors, took to the field with his teammates. The roar of the crowd, a symphony of cheers and jeers washed over him, a stark contrast to the sterile quiet of his spaceship. He felt a thrill he had never known before, a mix of nervous energy and exhilaration. The game started with a bang. The opposing team, larger and seemingly more experienced, dominated the early minutes. They scored a quick touchdown, their fans erupting in cheers. Xylo, playing as a wide receiver, found himself struggling to keep up with the pace of the game. His alien reflexes were sharp, but his understanding of the game's nuances was still developing. He ran his routes, his movements precise but hesitant, always a half-second behind the play. He was open for a pass on several occasions, but the quarterback, under pressure from the opposing team's defense, couldn't get the ball to him. Xylo felt a pang of frustration. He wanted to contribute, to prove his worth to his teammates, but the game was faster, more chaotic than anything he had experienced in practice. As the first half drew to a close, the score remained 7-0 in favor of the opposing team. The atmosphere in the locker room was tense, the coach's words of encouragement tinged with a hint of desperation. Xylo listened intently, absorbing the tactical adjustments and motivational speeches. The second half began, and Xylo, determined to make an impact, redoubled his efforts. He ran his routes with a newfound confidence, his movements becoming more fluid, more intuitive. He started to anticipate the quarterback's throws, positioning himself perfectly to make the catch. On one play, he broke free from his defender, sprinting down the sideline. The quarterback saw him and, with a flick of the wrist, launched a perfect spiral in his direction. Xylo stretched out his arms, his fingers closing around the ball just as a defender collided with him. He was knocked to the ground, the wind knocked out of him. But the ball was secure in his grasp. A cheer erupted from his teammates and the crowd, a wave of sound that washed over him, invigorating him. He didn't score a touchdown, but his catch gave his team a much-needed first down, extending their drive and keeping their hopes alive. The game continued, a back-and-forth battle of wills. Xylo's teammates, inspired by his effort, began to play with renewed vigor. Their defense tightened up, the offense found its rhythm. With minutes left on the clock, the quarterback connected with another receiver for a touchdown, tying the game. The crowd went wild, their cheers deafening. The final whistle blew and the game went into overtime. Xylo's heart pounded in his chest, his adrenaline surging. This is it. The moment of truth. In overtime, the opposing team had the ball first, but their drive stalled. They attempted a field goal, but it sailed wide. Now it was Xylo's team's turn. They marched down the field, each play a hard-fought battle. With the ball on the 5-yard line, the quarterback called a play for Xylo. He ran a slant route, cutting across the middle of the field. The quarterback saw him and threw the ball. Xylo reached out, but the defender got a hand on it, deflecting the pass. The ball fell incomplete. Xylo's heart sank. He had come so close, only to fall short at the last moment. But the game wasn't over yet. On the next play, the running back found a hole in the defense and burst through, crossing the goal line for the winning touchdown. The stadium erupted in pandemonium. Xylo's teammates mobbed the running back, their cheers echoing through the night. The final whistle blew again, a sound that pierced through the deafening cheers of the crowd. Xylo, despite not scoring the winning touchdown, found himself swept up in a tide of jubilant teammates. They hoisted him onto their shoulders, chanting his name, the laughter and cheers echoing through the stadium. He couldn't help but grin, the thrill of victory coursing through his veins. The post-game celebration was a blur of handshakes, backslaps, and shared drinks. Xylo, surrounded by his teammates, finally felt like he belonged. They had accepted him, not just as a player, but as a friend, a brother in arms. As the night wore on and the celebrations died down, Xylo found himself sitting alone in the locker room, the silence a stark contrast to the earlier chaos. He pulled out his datapad, his fingers flying across the keys as he compiled his final report. Humans, he wrote, are a species driven by a unique blend of logic and emotion. The pursuit of high-risk activities such as American football may seem irrational at first glance, but upon closer inspection, it reveals a deeper truth about their nature. He detailed his observations, the thrill of competition, the camaraderie of the team, the emotional roller coaster of victory and defeat. He wrote about the human need for connection, the purpose of pushing oneself beyond one's perceived limits. These activities, he continued, are not just about winning or losing. They are about testing one's mettle, about proving oneself in the face of adversity. They are about the pursuit of excellence, the thrill of the unknown, the satisfaction of overcoming fear. He concluded his report with a newfound appreciation for the human spirit, its resilience, its adaptability, its unwavering pursuit of what they called fun. Humans, he wrote, may be a strange and contradictory species, but they are also a fascinating and inspiring one. Their willingness to embrace risk, to push boundaries, to seek out new experiences is a testament to their indomitable spirit. They are a species that refuses to be defined by limitations, that constantly strives for something more. And that, he added with a final flourish, is perhaps the most crazy and the most beautiful thing about them. With this report complete, Xylo packed up his things, his heart filled with a newfound understanding and respect for the human race. He left the stadium, the cheers of the crowd still ringing in his ears. He made his way back to his ship. As he ascended into the night sky, he couldn't help but smile. He had come to Earth to study humans, but in the end, they had taught him a valuable lesson. They had taught him that sometimes the most illogical things in life are also the most worthwhile.